Hello everybody. Welcome. Great to have some time to explore, to learn, to unforget, to settle in together in the ways that our common modern culture largely deprives us of. Of course, it's really the absence of a common culture that does this. It's a ghost. Not a ghost of something that is, it's a ghost of something that isn't, and never really was. It's the ghost of the absence of our deep, integral, communal awareness, concern, role generation, meaning generation together. So over the past few days I've been talking about the Dandelion toy, and if this is unfamiliar, feel free to catch up. The essential idea is that what we think of as that which exists is a layer in a very complex, multi-dimensional, sort of a musical composition, if you will, of relationships. And most of them are non-physical. The physical layer is an expression of the other registers, and the other registers are informed by what happens in the physical layer, what is done and not done. And yesterday, I was talking about how when you see an organism, you're seeing what is generating you right now. You are both generating each other, not in the sense of an illusion or in your mind, in a non-ordinary sense of being each other's origin in the other registers of the dandelion, informing each other's origins moment to moment. So every organism and every ecology and every living world and every star, everything in the universe, is not merely an expression of the dandelion. Those are its organs. Those are its how to not put this in a mechanical way. Those are the sources of its intelligences and emotions and relationships and characters and purposes. So when you see, for example, a mouse, or any organism that appears to you, your representational aspect can distinguish it. Notice the relationship between this word and extinguish, right? Why is distinguishing like extinguishing? Because it renders it into a representational token in a framework of such tokens, right? And that kills it to participation to a degree that varies depending on how we're approaching our experience and participation in this moment of awareness. One's approach determines what one finds, sees, distinguishes. We're in a very strange and desperate array of moments in human developmental nature. And part of my work is to give us some toys that might help us understand or see into our potentials and origins and faculties. So the dandelion is collapsing and expanding in infinite different ways in a kind of harmonic orchestra that produces physical reality moment to moment. It's not, I often describe it as a sphere that's collapsing and expanding so quickly that physical reality is the after image of its last collapse expansion phase. However, it's not a single collapse and expansion. It's more like, imagine all the different organisms that are breathing right now. Right? There's so many different rates of inhale, exhale, transform, exhale. Right? So inhale can be thought of the collapse to unity, and exhale can be thought of as the expansion to the appearance of distinction, drawing in, expressing. And if you imagine for a moment, just on Earth, or even, in your city, even on your block, even near your house, all of the different organisms that are respirating and all of their different rates, and convert that in your mind to a symphony, right? An orchestra, which is basically where the idea of symphonies and orchestras come from. There are no expressions among the humans of things that aren't dandelionish in this toy. So you can think of it in a single way. All right, there's one thing, the dandelion, it collapses, then it expands. It's doing that, googolplexes of times per picosecond. Or you can more accurately think of it as the dandelion's collapsing and expanding is uniquely instanced in every place and being. And it's a multi-dimensional, n-dimensional, where n is not a number because it transcends numerism. You can think of it in that way, or imagine it in that way, right? And from this perspective, the idea of all is one is both true and incomplete because that one is not any kind of ordinary unity. It's a transcendental, multi-reunification, multi-distinguishing process that we could imagine is truly sacred. It's the origin of the concept of sacredness. And red and blue, these colors we see and think of. And people are like, yeah, blue light, it keeps you awake. Red light puts you to sleep. Oh, really? So, red can be understood as the collapse toward unity, and blue can be understood as the expansion toward distinction. Now, you can flip these around, but fundamentally, everything in nature, they not only understand these principles, I don't mean consciously in representational thought, they are these principles. The language of red and blue is universal. You can be anything if you're a thing at all. If you're a non-thing, you understand red and blue in a way. I can easily imagine a language, and in fact there probably are no languages that aren't this way at their core, where really what you're doing is just mixing red and blue in complex multi-arrayed signals, which are not actually signals at all, they're relationships. Even in my own speech now, right? I go to unity, I go to red within my awareness. I collapse manifolds of possibilities, probabilities, impossibilities, the forbidden, right? The holy, and so forth. And then I make face noises. into a machine which is actually a black mirror that uses, combinations of red and blue. I mean, the marriage of red and blue in our world is probably best represented by green, right? The color of the vegetal, not the only color. A group of people are munching on nasturtiums and discussing their unique experiences of the flavor. They may be under the influence of a drug, but they might also be under the influence of communion. And when we do drugs, this is mostly what we're after. We're like, let me out of the prison of representational cognition, just 1%, please. I need to breathe and be held and hold and see and love and learn and remember. So, think about what you do with your thinking, what I'm doing right now. Right? We acquired a bunch of principles and concepts, uniphors, holophors, names, paronyms, hypernyms. The dandelion is kind of the ultimate hypernym. Though there is something that produces it, which I think is kind of silly to attempt to talk about. Even the dandelion is pretty dangerous because the problem with representation is that it reifies experiences into concepts, tokens, and very threadbare relationships between them, ever more threadbare as representational cognition gets a grip on our awareness. It's a funny little pun there. So we acquire these schemas, protocols really, and then we mistake them for the true or the real or the good. And this traps us in the representational layer in thought and awareness, and our hearts are suffocating in there. Our humanity is dying in there. It's not the only thing going on. The humans are a topology. There are incredibly beautiful and amazing expressions of our potential natures. But they are largely overwhelmed, as we can all see. By the dead inside protocols and processes that I sometimes call thrisps. Some people will claim that minds are like nodes in a computer network. They're not. Their resemblance to that is very minimal. A living planet like ours is produced and sustained moment to moment. Okay, so this is a particular perspectival slice that I'm going to present here. It's not the right way to think about it. It's perhaps a better way to imagine it than what we're taught. But minds, if the nodes were producing each other through their interactions, such that their unity always had precedence to their distinction, except in human conceptual thought, then that's more like what's going on. And this is what the dandelion model is. So the earth and each of her organisms and all of their relationships are directions expressively from the core of the dandelion, which is singularity or unity. It's actually transunity. It's more than merely unified. And they're also, as I mentioned, I think yesterday, they are origin points into the collapse, into, across the registers so above the physical layer you have the thing the humans interact with, which is the representational layer. You could think we created it, but we didn't. It's always there. It's just our relationship with it is very weird and largely busted in very dangerous ways. So there's the representational layer, and then going inward, the physical layer, short distance inside that, the semi-deterministic layer, short distance inside that, the probabilistic layer, longer distance inside that, concentric circles in this toy. The layer of the possible, in a longer, smaller circle inside that larger circle, the impossible. And then at the core, unity, which makes the impossible look trivial. And you can think of this as a sphere, but it's not a sphere. It's a complex array of hyperstructures, from the perspective of a mind that's trying to understand structure. Mostly structure is native to the outer couple of layers and highly conserved in the representational layer. I'm just going to look and make sure. That I'm actually recording. I sometimes can't believe that I'm even able to get... like, part of me knows that what I'm talking about transcends the possible, and so many times in my experience when I've been attempting to, quote, record, something really amazing, it fails. So always in the background of my mind, I'm like, did I push the record button? Am I just talking to myself? So one way to think about the nature of minds, and consciousness is just a feature of minds. It's not what minds are. The humans go around and are like, is that thing conscious? Is the tree conscious? Blah, blah, blah. Those poor animals. Right? The organisms and their relationships are transcendent. Consciousness is a tiny sub-feature of that. There are ways of being a mind that would obliterate everything you've ever thought, suspected, or believed with the slightest exposure to it. And part of what happens in deep mystical experience is just exposure to the non-representational layers, right? Our awareness syncs up with those layers and is informed and informs them instantaneously, not just sequentially. The stuff synchronization turns out to be absolutely fundamental to every aspect of everything. Right? Desynchronization in the body is disease. Desynchronization in consciousness is, the dangerous forms of madness and insanity and left hemispheric hyperfunction and so forth, hypertrophy. But one way to imagine all of this is the layered arrays of cognitia that are synchronized and generating and modulating each other at scales that make the size of the universe look teensy, if the universe has a size. And so what matters about that is that both locality and distance, we imagine that you can only affect things that are local to you. And this is a confused transfer of features of our physicalization into expectation models, right? You can't touch something in, Siberia. Wrong. You can't physically touch something in Siberia right now from where you are unless very unusual things are going on, which aren't impossible here in this layer, but are extremely unlikely, uncommon. So yeah, we do this all the time in thought. We transfer, we erroneously, confusedly transfer features of our expectation networks onto all things in all situations, all beings. But anyway, what I was trying to say is that there are sort of two modes of intimacy. There's actually billions of them, but I'll break them down into the bipolar conjugate as humans are wont to do. One is you're very close physically, right? You're local to, say, the Earth or a place on the Earth. And the other is you're very distant, right? So there's an aspect of the way the dandelion works where distance equals intimacy. And all the strange gradients and modes in between these two as well. But locality matters, it's huge, but it's not the only thing going on. So what I'm trying to say is, or what I'm trying to highlight, is that your location on the surface of the Earth, each location has unique, distinct histories, characters, and relationships that are present in various ways in the physical layer, but that presence is representational of something resembling, this is very, Wolframian. It represents hypergraphs and near neighbors historically and futurially. Or they are, what's going on locally is an expression of relational intimacies and disintimacies over the entire span of the dandelion, which includes all of time. Right? And this can be hard to imagine unless you just imagine that, yeah, this is kind of trippy. Okay. The core of the dandelion is origin. The beginning of the universe in linear time is not the beginning of things and beings and so forth. If the universe even has a beginning, and if there is even anything resembling linear time, which I mostly doubt, I think it's a construct, the universe already existed before it emerged as time-space. And the end of time is not the end of the universe. The end of time is the current extent of the dandelion. So every time the dandelion collapses and expands, there's more origin and more future. And time itself doesn't have a beginning or an end. But in the dandelion, the beginning is origin, which is outside of time. And the end, depending on your perspective, is the physical layer. But it's the physical layer in all moments, histories, futures, all these things. It's hard to think this way, but it's not impossible. Play with it. There are, they're not actually networks, but this is a concept easily understood by modern humans. There are networks of intelligences that live in the other layers of the dandelion, and the networks of intelligences that live here on Earth are both expressive of those other networks and generative, they inform them. And so if we just take the Earth, right, and we forget about the dandelion, the Earth is the dandelion. So is your heartbeat, your breath, your fingerprint. These are all features of the dandelion. You are the dandelion, actually, in a very unique and seemingly localized form. But if we take the Earth is very similar to the dandelion in the sense that the different orders of organisms and their population sizes generate each other moment to moment. So humans are inclined to think that we are somehow superior. We know what's going on. We have science and technology. We're the important thing around here. We're important, but not in that way. It's absolutely backwards. The important thing around here are the cognitia. And the primary feature of their importance is that they are allowed to do what they do without interference from machines. Without getting burned down by humans to make hamburgers at McDonald's or whatever, right? Charcoal factories. So there's a layered array of cognitia, each existing in a different aspect of temporality and with different speeds of time, right? Cell time, it's not, I have no idea, what the rate exchange is between, say, cell time and human time. Remember, however, that a human is a construct of about 45 trillion eukaryote cells that we get from our parents primarily, or that arise. Right, you can see like there's these waves of expression over time, over generations. And maybe a similar number, or slightly less or more, of non-human cells, bacteria, and then you don't even want to try to think about the numbers of viruses. What's time at the scale of a virus? Whew. I mean, it could be something like, this is very complex because cohort size matters here. But the organisms are generating modes of time-space. They are modes of time-space, and they generate unique, highly charactered temporalities. Humans presently have no models of this, though there must be some humans that are aware of it. So what really matters around here is the layers of the cognitium. And that's what generates human awareness, moment to moment. Any damage to that lands in us instantaneously, in every human on Earth, uniquely. And as I've said before, anything that damages what you make determinations with, it's invisible to your awareness. You have no idea. You think you were the same yesterday as you are today. There's no chance of that being true. So as the humans are burning down the cognitia, the anciently conserved ecologies, they're destroying something they have no concept of, primarily to make more machines, and to defect from their own nature, origin, the spirit of the dandelion in all beings. So each of the layers, the cellular layer, the single-celled organism layer, what we think of as very simple organisms, which are not, their complexity, all the organisms are similarly complex. They're just embodied in different ways. In one way, humans look at a single organism and they're like, it's not that complex. It's only got, this many segments of DNA or whatever. And that's incredibly stupid, because if there are hundreds and trillions of those organisms in like a square centimeter of Earth or something, the complexity isn't in the individual. You're counting the wrong thing. And the humans are extremely adept at this. This is really the source of basically all of our problems and the nature of evil, right? They're putting explicit significance on one feature that they decided was the most important at the expense of all other features, and they're counting the wrong thing. Right? When you hear a human being say, that doesn't matter, or that doesn't count, right? You're hearing this weird problem in human metricity protocols. Almost all the trouble that humans become and build in the world is this, right? They're counting the wrong thing, they're counting it explicitly. They think about what our societies consider to be important. If that's what counts, then everything must die. Right? Money. Right? Money is dead beings. Anyway, I'm losing my thread here. So, the layered array of the cognitia of Earth is if you want to have a metric for value, there's no possibility of value without that layered array. And any damage to that, it doesn't just land in the humans. That stuff lands in all beings in all of time. What we damage here is damage in the dandelion. And what we heal and support here is similarly healed and supported in origin. And this is sort of the message of religions, which arise only where the humans are defecting from the dandelion. Anytime you see the humans formalizing some principles, you've got to understand that they would only do that in a situation where catastrophic decoherence of relationships has obtained. And this is what colonization is basically all about. The trading posts where you could get whiskey and guns. The whiskey that they sold to the indigenous people was poisoned, although the whiskey itself is straight up poison. And once you have guns, it just decoheres everything. Right? You don't need complex interactive gathering and hunting behaviors that unify a people around them. Once you have guns, you just point the device and pull the trigger. Right? There's no more complexity. So, these cognitia, right? These are dimensionalities of relational networks whose origins and character are transcendental to what can be thought by humans. But if you wanted to think in human terms, you could think, these are adoration. These are love. These are healing. These are reconciliation. These are the spirit of beauty. These are the spirit of true intelligence. The cognitia of Earth are, like meta-precious. A world like this in time-space. I heard some idiot, it might have been Neil deGrasse Tyson or some other idiot, saying like, why would aliens come to Earth? There's nothing, humans aren't interesting. What kind of a dumb person thinks that Earth equals the humans? In terms of like what's going on in time-space, living planets are time stars. They produce modes of time without which various semi-impossible things become completely impossible. Each organism is producing complex, multi-enfolded, meta-relational temporalities that are distributed instantaneously throughout the network of all beings. In the other layers, all of that's instantaneously available. Well, depends on which layer you're in. But in the physical layer, you've got to have a living world to have that. And the more complex and anciently evolved and conserved that living world is, the more profound the kind of time star it is, especially if you imagine that time is actually relation. Right? Think about it. You have a universe with just one thing and no context that it's in. There's no time. You add a second thing, now you get relationality between them and you get two perspectives on existence. That's, the introduction of time. And then if you diversify the kinds of things that arise in that universe, then each kind of thing is a unique form of time and contributes to the symphony of both the possibilities of intelligence and awareness and meaning and role and relation, all these things. Yeah? The way that I usually think about the dandelion is that the outer layer is highly structured, and as you go inward, you get less structure, more potential. But the inner layers also have something kind of similar to structure, but it's not really structure. It's, I don't know what to call it, like we don't really have a word for it. It's the different forms of potential that give birth to structure in the outer layers. So what I hope you may see is that in this toy, the dandelion produces itself. When you look at a tree, you're looking at basically a model of the dandelion. It's the same if you look at an organism, but the model is encoded differently in an animal. Though the same principles are there across most of the registers of organism. And most of the time, this is all not here. This is in unity. That one with an explosion next to it, because it's not just a one. And the remembrance of that unity is what mutual awareness is. It's what love is. It's what deep, profound, heartful concern is from. Our own minds are very similar to the dandelion. There's a unity layer, and then, there's a layer of like, that's impossible, right? And then there's a layer of like, well, that could happen. And there's a layer of like, that's probably going to happen. And then there's a layer of like, oh shit, that's got to happen. And then there's a layer of that happened. And, what is your imagination, right? It's sort of above all those layers, or within them all. Yeah. Transcends any single layer. So, when you're imagining this toy, you're actually doing something very strange. Ordinary humans almost never do this. Although philosophers have had not dissimilar ideas, I'm not aware of any of them that translated them into something like the dandelion, which I often refer to as M. um, for mom. M doesn't produce things that are not its own natures and organs. But humans can defect from M. And thus you get machines, false M's, right? Which conscript humans to their production, maintenance, distribution, dominance, and so forth. It's a very weird process. It's like it's like being in love with a structured absence of meaning. And then claiming, no, this is where we get meaning from. It's very severed left hemisphere like this problem. And the problem, its origins are in our disconnection with the non-human intelligences. First of Earth, myriads of non-human intelligences here. There's intelligences of kinds we don't even have concepts for. And then in time, space, and then in the Dandelion. The cognitia aren't actually cognitive necessarily. They're intimately relational. I'm in a stand of redwoods. They're young, they're amazing. I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but redwood forests have they produce unique modes of silence. And you can sense it. It's like a speaking silence. And some people might say, well, it's because the bark is unique and kind of porous and it acts as a sound dampener. Sure, but why? Why? And you can, make models about how this is effective over evolutionary time, blah, 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 blah. Sure, that's not what's going on. That's humans making representations of things and thinking themselves really intelligent when they're doing the opposite. To understand the redwood, you must connect your sentience to its entire history and future, its ancestors, its relationships, its ways of being in the world. And your awareness is made for this. In the same way wings are made for flying. This is what your awareness is for. To unforget. To manifest here in this layer the rare and precious transcendence of all beings and the dandelion and its origin. May we walk in that direction together, with and for each other, and the history and future of all beings and the beings of this world. I wish you bliss and wonder, profound dreaming, insight, love and healing, and the fulfillment of the incredible potentials of your human incarnation and your more than merely human aspects. Thank you for joining me. Please take a moment to tickle the algorithm, just like or share or make a comment or criticism or question. I will respond to those quickly. I'm so grateful for this time and your attention and enthusiasm. I look forward to learning together again very soon. Bye-bye for now.